Max Verstappen getting into a disagreement, a brawl, a fight with a Formula One driver is not exactly news. However, it is somewhat interesting to note that Max Verstappen's latest fight involves not a driver from an opposing team, but in fact his teammate. And the reason for that fight is, well, quite frankly ridiculous. It's a long-held grudge, and it has now come out into the open in the most ugly way possible. However, does this particular feud now actually have the power to undermine what has been a very well-constructed and a well-oiled Red Bull machine? Hello everyone and welcome back to Sports Today. My name is Shane Reyes and today we are going to look at a rather controversial moment from the Brazilian Grand Prix that has in fact dominated headlines across the Formula One and motorsport world. First off, it's important to look at what exactly it is I'm talking about. So for those of you who had missed the race or maybe need a bit of a refresher, here we go. Towards the end of the race, after the final safety car, Checo Perez was stuck on medium tires and therefore was getting passed by everyone. The problem with that was that, of course, he was losing out on points to actually be the driver placed second in the World Drivers' Championship. So Red Bull decided on a different strategy. They asked Perez to move aside for Verstappen and then told Verstappen that, look, you go ahead and try and hunt down both Fernando Alonso and Charles Leclerc. However, the remit at that point was very, very clear, and it was an instruction that was given over team radio that if Verstappen could not overhaul either of them, he would give the place back to Perez towards the end, for the simple reason that Perez finishing at that particular position would have helped him stay ahead in the race for second place in the World Drivers' Championship. You'd remember that the Drivers' Championship has, of course, already been sealed by Verstappen, but for Red Bull, they're going for a historic first, that being their first 1-2 in the World Drivers' Championship. Now, it doesn't happen often. It's something that has happened a lot in recent years. You remember Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello did it at Ferrari, Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton did it at Mercedes, and in fact even Hamilton and Bottas, if I recall correctly, have also done a similar thing during the latter years of Mercedes' dominance. So it is something that does happen, but it's never happened for Red Bull, which is why they're very, very keen to actually preserve that team dynamic and also ensure that they can get that. However, Verstappen blew everything out of the water when he chose not to give the position back to Checo Perez. The result means that as of now, Perez is still in second place. He's equal on points with Leclerc. But if it finishes equal after the final race at Abu Dhabi, then Charles Leclerc will be awarded second place because of the fact that on countback, he has more race wins than Perez. Naturally, Perez felt aggrieved, but before we talk about how Perez felt about it, let's see and understand why it is that Verstappen chose to do what it is he chose to do. He first off put out a very terse radio message when he was asked why exactly he didn't give the position back to Checo. In fact, he said, I told you guys already last time, you don't ask me to do that again. Okay, are we clear about that? I gave my reasons and I stand by it. Whew. Tell us how it is you really feel, Max, because the way he put across that message came across as very tense. It came across as him being very annoyed that he was actually asked to move aside for his teammate, and perhaps most importantly, it gave across the image of a man who knows that he is the top dog of that particular team. Naturally, Perez wasn't very happy about this because, as I said, if Perez had been given that position, he would still be ahead of Leclerc in the championship. Unfortunately, that's not really what's happened. So naturally, he was a little bit miffed, and we'll go over what it is that he said. But first, let's also look at what Verstappen said after the race when speaking to the media. He said that, look, we sat together, we being him, Checo, Helmut Marko, and of course, team principal Christian Horner, and we put everything on the table. I understand Checo's frustration and I understand that he's disappointed, but I also gave my reasons for why it is that I won't do it. Doubtless, obviously, most of you are asking, what reasons did he really have? Well, the reason he had was, it stems all the way back to the Monaco Grand Prix earlier this year. Now, you remember that in qualifying, it was the final sector, or it was the final part of qualifying when pole position was up for grabs. Sergio Perez ended up crashing his car, and due to that, qualifying towards the end was red flagged. And as a result, Checo started one position ahead of Verstappen and would eventually actually go on to win the race. So Perez, with that race win, actually cut the Verstappen's lead at the top at that point, and this was at a time when Perez still actually had a shot, a very slim shot admittedly, but still had a shot of chasing that World Drivers' Championship. That is something that Verstappen believes he did on purpose. He caused that crash on purpose, and so because of that, he chose this moment of all time to take his revenge. Now, naturally, as I said, Checo wasn't very pleased about it. He had one very terse message on radio where he says it shows who he really is. After he said that, Christian Horner actually had to apologize on team radio to Checo, saying that shouldn't have actually happened. But after the race, he was also very, very expressive and said that, look, I've done a lot for him in the past, which is correct. We'll get to that in a bit. And he also said that I definitely need to feel like I have equal standing in the team. Otherwise, it makes no sense for me. Now, obviously, that's an understandable circumstance to look at because, again, if you remember, Red Bull winning the title, and in fact Verstappen and Red Bull winning the World Drivers' Championship in 2021 would not have been possible without Perez helping him out, whether it be in that finale at Abu Dhabi or many other races before when Perez would either work hard to keep Hamilton and Bottas behind them, or when he would be willingly ceding positions to Verstappen to ensure that Verstappen could get the biggest points finishes possible. All of those things really stood out, and in fact, if you'd remembered, after the end of the campaign, both Horner and Verstappen had labelled Sergio Perez the Minister for Defence. Such was his penchant for actually keeping drivers behind him. But it does appear that there's some degree of fracturing now within that relationship, and this is what it really comes down to when you're looking at it. This feud all just seems very, very unnecessary, but perhaps more importantly, it does really have shades of the multi-21 controversy that it took place between Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber from 2013. For those of you who don't remember that, I would recommend you go and check it out on YouTube. The short story, however, is that Webber and Vettel were leading home a 1-2 for Red Bull at that particular time in the Malaysian Grand Prix in 2013. Webber and Vettel had both been instructed to not race each other, but Vettel took things into his own hands and from second place eventually wound up getting past Webber and winning the race. It was a major talking point at that point because that was the time when relations between both those drivers had reached their absolute lowest, and that particular thing just exacerbated it further. This does have remnants of that because in some ways Verstappen has chosen to take matters into his own hands, but it's actually way more pointless because he's undone the team harmony, Verstappen, that is, he's undone a team harmony that has served him so well. Look, we all know for a fact that when it comes down to Red Bull, they're always going to be favoring Verstappen over Perez, and it's understandable why. Verstappen is their young hotshot, their young driver who they can build the team around for at least 10 years. Perez is one season away from retirement every single time he sits in the car. They're not going to be favoring Perez unless Perez can outmatch and consistently outdo Verstappen, something that hasn't happened and in all likelihood will not happen. And if you look at it in the bigger scheme of things, what did Verstappen accomplish except proving the fact that he's the top dog? We knew that anyway. We know that the team is built around Verstappen. We know that Perez, despite the fact that he can appear frustrated at times, is very much a team player and is already subservient to the Red Bull cause. Despite that, Verstappen felt it okay to put across such behavior just to get the point across that I am the man in this team and don't you ever forget it. It really undoes a lot of things, and truth be told was something that really shouldn't have happened because it can actually cause problems now. What if in the future Perez is in a similar position? Would he yield as easily as he's done in the past? That's something that we don't really know, but if you're asking me, it's hardly an ideal situation, especially since it puts across the point that Verstappen has to be in the center of everything. Otherwise, he's not going to be playing the team game for sure. But that's just how I feel. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and don't forget to tap that bell icon so you know when we're going live or uploading a new video for you guys. Then you can go ahead and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as well. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, I've been Shane Rice. I hope to see you with us through the day, but for now, goodbye.